It's 11:30 in the morning. The TV is mumbling something about stocks. George is sitting in a chair holding an old photo of him, Martha, and little Sam at a picnic in Maine. Everyone is smiling. He even remembers how he got sunburned that day because he forgot his sunscreen. Martha laughed and smeared sour cream on his shoulders. And now there is silence. The photo has turned yellow, like everything else around it. George is 71. His pension is meager, his car is old, his back hurts, and his soul is like a rotten floor that could cave in at any moment. He once had everything: a house full of guests for Thanksgiving, the noise of children, the smell of pie. Now he has one room in a tiny apartment, a kettle that doesn't always boil, and a cat he hasn't fed since yesterday. The cat's name is Elvis, because he always roars at night like a rock star. But even Elvis has been quiet lately. How did this happen? George puts the photo back in the box. His thoughts wander like a lost letter. He remembers Martha saying, "You're not listening to me." He really wasn't listening. He was working, 12 hours a day, because money will not earn itself. And now no one needs this money. And it's gone. He picks up the phone. He dials his daughter's number, Emily. She doesn't answer. George leaves a message. "Hey, baby, I was wondering. Maybe you could come over this weekend." And then he hangs up. There is silence. Even the cat's litter box looks judgmental. George used to be a car mechanic. He had hands as strong as wrenches and a heart that could still laugh. He and Martha built everything together. Their first house. The first car. The first miscarriage. Then children. Then the fights. Then silence that lasted longer than the marriage. Marta left 3 years ago. She simply said, "I can't take it anymore," and she disappeared. They say she lives with some professor from Arizona. George imagines for a moment that Emily will call back. What she will say: "Dad, come home, the kids miss you, let's bake a cake together." But the phone is silent, and he picks up the second photo. He and Sam are in the garage, assembling an old Ford. The moment when his son still looked at him with respect, not with contempt. Today, Sam is an IT specialist in Seattle. And he earns a lot of money and has a wife whom George has only seen in photos. They haven't visited for more than 5 years. All these psychologists who talk about aging with dignity are liars, George mutters. Old age is like waiting for a bus that won't come. And no one will even tell you that it has been taken off the route. He used to laugh at those who believed the TV. Now he is waiting for a program to say something. Your life still has meaning. Everything here is a reminder. Old cups, broken plates, even a lamp with a cracked shade. He does not repair it because there is no point. Until the light goes out completely. Something clicked in the socket. He sits in the dark. The cat starts mooing again. And George says out loud, "I know Elvis. I want to go back too." There is a calendar on the wall. An old calendar from 2015. He takes it off and sees an envelope behind it. It's been forgotten. Inside is a postcard from his granddaughter. It reads, "Grandpa, I love you. Come back in the summer. Your Bella." Something seemed to collapse in my chest, but at the same time, it warmed up. He takes Marta's photo and puts it next to the postcard. Then he picks up the kettle, pours water, and puts it on the stove. Although he knows that the gas should have been turned off yesterday, but today he wants tea. And an answer. The phone lights up. But it's just spam. For 3 nights in a row, at 3 in the morning, George woke up sweating and feeling as if someone was whispering his name. The first time, he thought it was a dream. The second time, he thought it was the TV left on by his neighbors. And the third time, he got up and turned on the light. The apartment was empty. Only Elvis was sitting on the kitchen table, staring into space. He didn't believe in the mystical. Never had. But those damned good mornings that echoed in his head were haunting him. Maybe I'm going crazy. Or is this what old age looks like when voices become more real than news? He put on a robe, wandered into the kitchen, and turned on the kettle. Again, the third night in a row, the same ritual. Everything he did now was mechanical. He would wake up, check his account, which had a little over $70 left in it, feed Elvis, go to the mailbox, which was always either empty or full of bills, sit on a bench outside the supermarket, and listen to strangers talk. Sometimes he even imagined that they were talking about him, that they were remembering him, that he existed. When he was young, before credit cards, he kept money in a red envelope hidden behind Marty's photo, and every night before going to bed, he touched that envelope as a talisman. Now there is only a spot of glue where the envelope used to be. And his head feels empty, like an old attic where everything has long been forgotten, but something else seems to rustle. This morning George went to get coffee. The same store, the same cashier, a girl with a mohawk and a tattoo of seagull on her neck. He didn't ask her name. He knew she wouldn't remember his name. But this time she said, "This is the third day in a row that you've come at exactly 6:00. "No," George answered hoarsely. "It's when you're afraid to go back to sleep." "Is there someone waiting for you at home, Grandpa?" She asked after he came out with the coffee, and George didn't answer. Not because he didn't hear, but because he didn't know how to tell the truth. No one is waiting. Even I don't wait for myself. He returned home, sat in his chair, and stared at the TV. There was a show about home renovation. Young couples were turning leaky barracks into dreams. George remembered how he used to putty the walls while standing on a stool. And Martha said, "They're all cracked, George, just like us." He smiled then, and today he wanted to scream. At 7 a.m. he received a text message. He jumped up, and his heart beat somewhere near his ribs. Today the automatic payment for electricity is being withdrawn. There are not enough funds in your account. That was it. The lights went out. The refrigerator was silent. He sat silently, holding the phone as if he was about to say something important. At 9 o'clock, a call from an unknown number, a George Stanley. A woman's voice, stern and a little tired. "Yes. This is the Social Assistance Center. We're reviewing welfare cases. You haven't renewed your status in over a year." "Because I didn't know I was on welfare." "That's no excuse. If you don't show up on Monday, your benefits will be suspended." "Fine. I don't have any money to pay anyway." He hung up the phone. Elvis looked at him like a judge. He pulled out an old box of documents, and there were bills, checks, letters, and a photo he hadn't seen in a long time. Him, Emily, and Bella at the Grand Canyon observation deck. Emily was laughing. Bella was holding his fingers. He remembered thinking, "I wish I could stop this day." And now he wanted to stop life. The next night he woke up again at 3. But this time it was not from a voice. It was from himself. And because he was screaming in his sleep, "Don't take her away, please. Not again." He sat in the dark with a wrinkled face and trembling hands. And suddenly he realized he was not afraid of old age. He was afraid that no one would ever say good morning to him again. There, behind a box of rusty screwdrivers and old buttons, George found it a Maxwell coffee can full of change. Forgotten like a memory. Filled like a child's hopes. It was his untouchable piggy bank. From the days when Emily used to say, "Put every cent in it, you might need it one day." But that day never came. It came. George took the jar in his hands as if he were holding a heart that could still be made to beat. These pennies have heard our quarrels, seen Bella in diapers, survived a marriage, infidelity, divorce, and my 2 heart attacks. And they're still here. Where are the rest of them? He put the jar on the table and opened it carefully, as if he was afraid that the memories would spill onto the floor. The smell of metal was pungent, like the irony of life. He remembered how Bella had once taken a few coins from it for ice cream when she was 9. He had been offended and gave her a whole lecture about saving money. And now he would give anything to have her sneak up on again and steal another 5 cents. The power was indeed turned off. Not suddenly, not with a bang, but somehow quietly, shyly. The monitor went off, the refrigerator wheezed and fell silent, and even Elvis went silent. The darkness that settled in the apartment was not scary. It was empty. Like him? "I need to count," George said aloud. He took kitchen scale and an old calculator out of the cupboard and started sorting. Pennies in one pile, nickels in another. Each coin landed with a resounding tinkle, as if the last seconds of his patience were running out. A veteran, former insurance agent, and now a small-time accountant, he muttered, smiling at the evil corner of his lips. On the way out of the building, he saw a sign, "Buy small change, pay in cash." He felt a little funny. It turns out that his bankruptcy has long been in demand. "If this is all I have left, then at least let them sell it nicely," he said and left. The pawn shop was dark and smelled of damp cardboard and old sweat. A man with a bald beard and a tattoo of "I hate Mondays" on his forearm sat behind the counter. "What do you have?" he asked without looking at me, and the hope that at least some of it is worth something. He looked at it, rattled the coins for a long time. "Only $3.85, but I'll give you $5, because you remind me of my father. He also collected everything." $5, George asked again. "In a lifetime?" Maybe more. But you didn't come here for the exact exchange rate. You came for a little hope, didn't you?" George sighed. "I didn't expect to be bargaining for my dignity in my old age." "Huh?" "You have more than most who come here," the man replied, holding out a banknote. I walked back on foot. It was raining, but there was no umbrella and no evil. The $5 in my pocket burned like an order, and not because it was a lot, but because someone had noticed him, at least for a moment, and there was something more than money in that. It felt like he was still part of the world. A neighbor, Mrs. Tony, was sitting on a bench near the house. She was smoking a thin menthol cigarette and staring at nothing. "You're out late tonight, George." I was exchanging pennies for dignity. "How's the exchange rate?" "Stable. And there is always a shortage of warmth." They both smiled. For the first time in weeks. It was that moment when life tilts slightly and doesn't fall yet. At night, George sat by the window with a cup of hot water because the tea was over. And he thought, maybe I'll go tomorrow too. Maybe I'll find some other little thing that I can exchange for human warmth. And Elvis was purring in the corner, as if to confirm that life had not yet said its last good night. If you think the worst thing is lonely nights, you've never met a former love between the shelves of beans and toilet paper. And especially when you have only discounted yogurt and a pack of the cheapest noodles in your hands. George walked through the supermarket like a minefield. His shopping list was short and humiliating: oatmeal, the cheapest bread, something on sale, tea at least some. Just don't forget the 2-for-1, you old fool," he muttered, looking at the bananas as if they were diamonds. And then there she was. Linda, hair still in waves. The coat is expensive. The smile is the same, but not for him anymore. She hadn't changed, and he stood there like a frozen chicken in the refrigerator. Her gaze slid over him and froze George. "Is that you?" "Yes. In the flesh. Though there's a little less flesh than there used to be," he said, and tried to smile, but it came out sour. "I wouldn't have recognized you. I don't recognize myself sometimes. Especially when I look in my wallet." Aina knew they stood by the shelf of canned fish as if at an altar. The memory was falling on them like salt on a wounding. "Are you still in that neighborhood?" she asked. "I'm renting a room from an uncle who believes in conspiracy theories and is afraid of microwaves." "And Bella?" "She's in New York. We hardly ever talk. She says I'm too dramatic." "She's your daughter, George. She must know she knows. She just doesn't want to know anymore." Silence. "Sometimes I think maybe we shouldn't have split up like that. Come on, you got married in 2 months, but not for love. And I was unstable. You were a dreamer, and poor. And I was afraid. And now. I'm just in the supermarket, looking at the man I once loved." It was like a slap in the face. And a knife at the same time. They walked together to the checkout, like old friends carrying bags of doubts and memories. The Linda was saying something about children, grandchildren, a new summer house in Texas. And he listened and thought, this could have been our conversation. But it wasn't. He was 40 cents short at the cash register. "Oh, I don't think I can get a tea," he muttered. And then Linda pulled out her carding. "I'll pay for it." "No need. Come on. It's tea." "That's why maybe we didn't work out," he said, but he took it, because pride had long since disappeared in exchange for survival. "Maybe we'll see each other again someday," she said. "If not in this world, then at the canned food shelf." They hugged each other, warmly, for real, and forever. Because there were things that could not be changed. George walked home, holding the tea like a treasure. A question echoed in his mindy. What if I hadn't gone then? But there were no answers. There were only the streets that knew him better than his own daughter. At home, he put the kettle on. It smelled like mint. He sat by the window and said, "Well, George, today you didn't just survive. Today you remembered that you are still alive." And Elvis purred from the couch, confirming every word. "Do you think that after 60, new friends are only at the clinic or in line at the ATM?" Well, no. But sometimes new acquaintances are not just a light at the end of the tunnel, but also a shadow that sneaks up behind you. The sun was climbing through the window like an uninvited guest. George was sitting in the kitchen, savoring the oatmeal and tea he had bought yesterday thanks to his ex. Elvis watched him from under an old armchair. "What, my friend, aren't you used to the fact that we have tea again?" George grumbled, and he smiled to himself. Small joys or something. There was a knock at the door. Not a ringing bell, not an unannounced entrance, but a polite, old-fashioned knock. A FAA man in a vest and baseball cap stood on the threshold. "I'm Carl. I'm the new tenant upstairs. I saw that your antenna was broken, so I thought maybe I could help." Carl was about his age, a little thinner, but with a cheerful walk and that restless gleam in his eye that comes from seeing too much. "Thanks for the antenna, but I haven't turned on the TV for a long time. I don't feel like it." Well, then maybe I'll just come in for tea. We'll have a chat like two veterans of survival." And they did. They talked about politics, about sons who don't call, about the internet, which they don't understand, and about TV shows they used to watch with their wives. Carl laughed out loud and uncensored. George hadn't heard so much swearing in one dialogue in a long time, and he loved it. "You're a normal guy, George. I thought this place was full of retired zombies. It's just coffee without sugar. It makes me a philosopher." Carl offered, "Hey, do you want a part-time job? I'm doing some odd jobs, repairs, restoring antiques. People pay good money for old shit. Me, I don't have the right hands. You thought I was a plumber. You just need a little skill and a little flexible morality." The next day, Carl took George to a basement in the neighborhood. There was old furniture, radios, something that resembled a scrap museum. We restore these things and then sell them." Carl winked. "Some of it looks real. The difference is in the eyes of the beholder." George looked at the broken lamp and asked himself, "Isn't this better than waiting for my daughter to give me a handout?" Carl seemed to read his mind. "We don't steal anything. We just give things a second chance. And if I'm let down again, you've been there before, my friend." That night George came home with $50 in cash. Real, rustling, fragrant. He put it in a coffee can and sat down to look at Elvis. "Is that bad?" he asked. Elvis did not answer, but sighed as if he had seen it all before. The next morning the police came to the house, not to his house, but nearby. "Did you know Carl Scott?" one of the officers asked. He said he was Carl, and that he restores things, and he restores credit cards and keys and identities. George stood there, stunned, tea in his hands. His heart was fluttering. Again, I believed. He spoke to Elvis, but he spoke to himself. Once, a shame on him. Twice at me, and even those $50 now burned in my pocket as proof of weakness. In the evening, a neighbor came over, Mrs. Rogers, and said, "I saw you talking to that Carl guy. It's not your fault. He deceived a lot of people. But who knows what's true and what's restoration nowadays? The truth is that you haven't broken yet. And that, George, is a feat in our age. That night George could not sleep for a long time. The new friends are always a risk. But so are old fears. Sometimes you have to pay cash for your faith, and with your heart for naivety. Have you ever started the day with a stranger hugging you on the street? And then another one, and then another. And then you realize this is no accident. This morning, George didn't have the energy to be angry. After the story with Carl, the world seemed even dimmer. But while he was slowly drinking his coffee, someone knocked on the window from the street. "Smile. Man!" a teenager in a bright jacket shouted. "Smile's going to town." George went out. Three teenagers in T-shirts with the words, "Your smile is your weapon," were standing at the entrance. One of them handed George a piece of paper. "Flash mob, mister. We give smiles to strangers, and we count them. You are smile number 449. Smiles. Do you have any idea how much happiness costs after 65? George grumbled. "That's why we started. My grandmother is 73. She says that only a smile is free." He didn't know what made him follow them. Maybe it was the strange lightness in their words. Maybe the lack of regret. Or maybe he just wanted to be a part of something. And now George is at the mall. He is standing in the middle of a crowd where every teenager is holding a sign. Your smile is priceless. And do you know what? People are really smiling. George. He looked around. A woman from his past was standing in front of him. Mary. They used to work together in a hospital. She's a nurse. He's a driver. "I never would have believed I'd see you here." Smiling. "Really? I don't believe it either. But it's better than being at home with the cat and gnawing on the past." They sat down on a bench with coffee. Mary was laughing like she used to, although she had wrinkles. She didn't ask questions, she just told me, and about how she volunteers at the hospital. "You know," she said, "sometimes I think that maybe we haven't become poorer. Maybe we're the only thing in this world that's still real," George replied. The teenagers came up again. We want to make a video. 100 older people or 100 smiles. Do you want to be the first? What do you have to do? Just be yourself. And say the phrase, "I can still do it." George smiled. For the first time sincerely. Write it down. "I can still." Shut up any pessimist with coffee and memories. The recording was short, but the latter was long. Mary even shed a tear. It's been a long time since I've heard you laugh like that. I don't remember it being real." On the way home, George had a small card in his pocket. A simple phrase was written on it. 10,000 smiles are one soul saved. He stopped and looked up at the sky. Maybe someone else will be saved. In the evening, the phone rang. It was an old landline. "Dad, it's Jenny." "His daughter? I saw the video. Were you there? With the teenagers?" "Me. And I'm still giving them a run for their money. Can I come over tomorrow? I want to talk." "Just talk." After the conversation, George sat in silence. Elvis rubbed his leg. 10,000 smiles, you say?" Nay, and I, a fool, thought that happiness had to be bought. That night George did not fall asleep immediately. But for the first time in a long time, it was not because of fear. It was because of hope. Maybe a smile is not the end, and it is the beginning. And maybe even an old soul can become part of something great. Is it possible to lose hope in 30 seconds? That's how long the call lasted that made George remember what the bottom looks like again. The sun came into the room before the alarm clock. George never set his alarm, but he still woke up feeling like he had overslept. Elvis jumped on his lap, purring and mooing, hinting at breakfast. Everything was as usual. While the oatmeal was cooking, George looked through the mail. Papers from pharmacies, postcards from the church, and between them an envelope with no return address. It was heavy, thick. He opened it, and Aluma forgot how to breathe. "Dear George Gant, in accordance with the decision of the Benton County Court, you are ordered to pay the amount of the debt in the amount of $49,000. My eyes jumped to the signature. Archer Collection Group, had Department of Collections. Had Carla gotten into debt in his name again? Or were these those old house bills he thought he'd written off long ago? Zeros began to dance in his head. 49,000. Where would he get that money? He didn't even turn on the air conditioner in the summer to avoid paying extra. George grabbed the phone and dialed the number on the letter. Hello, this is Archer Collection Group. Please hold. The music was ear-splitting. A thin woman's voice, too calm. Your case is on file. Collection will begin in 14 days. If the amount is not paid, we will have grounds to apply to the court for a seizure of the property. George sat in the kitchen with cold oatmeal. Elvis crunched his food as if nothing had happened. He read the letter again, then again, but the numbers didn't change. 49,000 was like a sentence. He walked to Marie in silence, heavy as a sick man. She opened the door in her bathrobe and immediately saw that something was wrong. Who died? Me. Almost. I was eaten by the sewers. What kind of nonsense is that? Come in, and tell me everything in order. George spread the letter on the table. You think I signed anything? I'm not crazy. Mary took her glasses and read it carefully. Listen, it's about a joint debt. Yet it was signed the year you were still with Carla. But she paid it off. George, do you really believe that Carla paid off anything? She should have at least a little conscience. Marie took matters into her own hands, and I know a girl, a lawyer. She works for a nominal fee for pensioners. Let's call her. An hour later, they were talking to Taylor, a young woman with a sharp voice and clear questions. Mr. Gant, you didn't sign this agreement after the divorce. No, we were already separated. She just left the address. This could change the situation. But we need to pull up the archives. Do you agree if I take this case? After the call, George sat back in his chair. Well, at least it's something. Don't rejoice too soon, Mary warned. In the evening, the phone rang again. Dad, I saw the letter. Mom's. She wrote to me. She says the debt collectors are looking for you because of her old debts. She wrote to you. Yes. Crying, asking for forgiveness, says she wants to see you. George paused for a moment. Forgiveness. After everything. After she left him in debt, used his credit card, and disappeared. Jenny. Tell her she can come. Are you sure? No. But she needs to look me in the eye at least once. George didn't sleep that night. The letter was on his desk, the phone next to it. He was waiting, and he didn't know what he wanted, mooring revenge and explanation, or just a human apology. Some meetings should not be planned. Because it is spontaneity that opens the door to the truth without makeup, without apologies, without beautiful words. George woke up before sunrise. Not because of Elvis. Not because he was tired. But because his stomach was clenching, as if waiting for a punch. She was coming today. Carla. The one who had disappeared from his life and left traces that still hurt. Instead of oatmeal, he had black coffee in a thermal cup. And a bun, yesterday's, with the crunch of cracks. He didn't want to take her home. Not out of anger, but he just didn't want the smell of her perfume to permeate his kitchen again. So he chose a bench. The same bench where they used to sit the first year after their wedding, sharing ice cream and laughing that they were both in their 40s. It was ironic that now they were both in their 70s, but they didn't feel like laughing. Carla approached quietly. She still knew how to walk so that you couldn't hear her heels, as she was wearing a long coat, glasses, and a folder in her hands, a Carla. He didn't get up, just nodded his head. She sat down next to him, leaving a good hand and a half of space between them. Thanks for seeing me. I wanted to see the person who signed over a $49,000 debt to me. I didn't know it was still in your name. Did we have a joint account? Yes. Once. So you did. Carla took a gulp of air, or something that looked like shame glistened in her eyes. Or tears, George wasn't sure. I didn't come to ask. I just want to explain. Explain. What about atoning? She opened the folder. When I left, I was sick, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I didn't want to be a burden to you. A burden. You were my wife. We promised to be together in sickness and in health. I didn't want you to sell the car, give up your insurance, spend nights in the hospital. So it was better to disappear and leave me with debts. Carla turned away. I didn't ask for a penny. I survived. But I lost everything. And after chemotherapy, I wasn't myself. And did your not self also sign a loan to renovate your house? I went back to my sister's in Vermont. I lived there with almost no money. All that was on my credit card was for medical treatment. I thought it was canceled after the divorce. But I didn't check. I didn't warn her. I didn't explain. And George clenched his fist like he was holding on to his last thread of patience. And Jenny. She was waiting for you to call. She cried at Christmas. I was ashamed. Wasn't I ashamed of counting pennies for my medicine? When I refused to buy new shoes because I was afraid of another bill falling into the box. He took a sip of cold coffee. Why did you come here now? Because I found out that the debt collectors got to you. I wanted to tell you, that I'm trying to sell my aunt's house. And you think you're going to wipe it all out? Carla was silent. A gust of wind blew the leaves out of the folder, and one fell to the ground. I can't erase it. But I want to fix it at least a little. Then, if not between us, then at least in front of you, George. I'm not asking us to get back together. I don't want to be a shadow in your life anymore. It's too late, Carla. Shadows are what's left after the light. And the light, you turned it off a long time ago. She stood up and put the envelope with the money on the bench. And a letter. For Jenny. If you can, give it to her. She left without looking back. George remained seated, with a bun in his hand that he hadn't eaten. Elvis was waiting at home. Jenny was waiting for a call. And somewhere in between, George began to realize that even when it seems that there is nothing left, someone can always come along and say, I'm sorry, I was stupid. When you have only one photo that you don't want to remember, everything else suddenly loses its meaning. Because the real memories are the ones that hurt, even if you erase them from the album. On Sunday, George went to the attic. Not for the sake of cleaning, he just wanted to find a box of albums, the ones that had been gathering dust for years. After the divorce, our Carla disappeared, after Jenny got married and moved to the other side of the states. The dust stung my nose, my hands trembled, and I felt a dull expectation in my heart, as if the lid was about to open and something would jump out that would either save or kill him. He sat down on an old, creaking chest. There were 2 albums on his lap. The first one was Jenny's childhood. A little girl in red pants on a swing with ice cream on her nose. George remembered that day it was hot. He had his paycheck in cash, and they bought more ice cream than they could eat. And then we both had stomachaches. He muttered aloud and smiled to himself. But not for long. The second album was empty. More precisely, the photos had been torn out of it. Carefully. Obviously, with calculation. It was a family album. Weddings, vacations. A trip to Yalta before everything collapsed. Only ink signatures Maying. Our first night in Denver. Carla and Torgy 5 years together. Breakfast in bed Sunday. And what? Carla, did she take that too? He sighed. Or maybe Jenny did it. But why? He closed the album. Empty pages like empty promises. They looked good until you looked closer. Clearing his throat, George heard a soft sound, the vibration of his phone. A message. He pulled out his cell phone. Dad, I have a photo shoot with Tomic today. I want to make a photo album just like when we were kids. Do you remember ours? George's fingers froze over the keyboard. He wanted to answer, but there were no words. Het put the phone down and took an old camera off the shelf. The one that started the whole story. A Kodak, a gift from Carla for my 40th birthday. Yes, Carla, it's engraved, in memory of our light. The irony is so stinging. He turned the camera around in his hands. He opened the compartment and there was an old film, unused. Well, old man, can we take one more shot? George took the film and put it in his pocket. Oh, no, he didn't know why, but he wanted to feel that at least something was still unfinished. Maybe tomorrow he would go to the park and take a picture of Elvis. Oh, or one of his new friends, that old Lady Marie who bakes pancakes on the bench near the church, or maybe even himself, when his smile is finally not from the past but from the present. The doorbell rang. He went downstairs. He opened the door and a man in a jacket with the words, U.S. Postal Service, stood on the threshold. A package for George Fletcher. It's me. Sign for it. He held a small box carefully packed. No signatures. The sender is anonymous. He opened it with a kitchen knife. Inside is another album. This time it is completely filled. A photo, Jenny. Him, all the years, even the ones he didn't have. Jenny's college selfie. The wedding, a photo of a grandson he hadn't seen. A note on the last page. I know you won't forgive me, but I remember every moment. And I want you to remember too. George sat with the album for a long time. His hands were shaking, as if he'd been in a great cold. Well, Elvis, maybe it's time to buy a new record. The dog barked as if in agreement. There was only one photo left on the table, yellowed and worn, but still smiling. Although there was no signature on the back, George remembered. We didn't know then that happiness was instantaneous. Sometimes we wake up in tears and don't understand whether it was a dream or life. But when you hear your mother's voice, even in a dream a time stands still, because there is something that never dies. That night George woke up at 3 a.m. For the second time in a week, the dream left as soon as he lay down, as if someone had rung the bell and turned everything off. Elvis was sleeping by the door, snoring, not even moving. A pale light was shining through the window, the same LED from the neighboring garage that George had once promised to nail with something heavy. But he never got around to it. As with so many things, and he got up, threw on a shirt, and went into the kitchen. And then he heard it, Die Zordzig. Don't sit in the cold, you'll catch a kidney infection. He shudder rose. He looked around. Silence. No one. Only the light of the refrigerator and the shadow of the toaster. Mom, he whispered, although he knew perfectly well that she had died more than 30 years ago, and yet her voice. So real, so familiar. Like the night she had ironed his shirt for graduation. He went back to the bedroom. He sat down on the bed, closed his eyes, and he saw her. In a dream, or not really. His mother was wearing the same white button-down dress she had worn in the 80s. Her hands were tired and her eyes were tired, but her smile was the same as the young girl in the first photo in the album. Why are Georgic? She said. Why are you so lonely? Because they're all gone, Mom, he replied in an almost boyish voice, and so are you. I'm always here for you. You just don't listen to your heart. He remembered when they were children, sitting in the kitchen. She was baking bread and he was making little men out of dough. She always laughed. That one is definitely your dad. And then she would put her hand on his head and say, remember, my boy, the world is a cruel place. But don't be like that. And he didn't understand what she was talking about then. And now, the world is tough, Mom. I've become hard because otherwise. He whispered. The phone vibrated again in the night. A message from Jenny. I dreamt about Grandma. She said you were crying. Are you okay? It hit him? Really, completely. If two people have the same dream, is it still a dream? Oh, come on, he muttered, wiping his eyes, although he wouldn't admit to anyone that he had been crying. I'm fine, he wrote. George got up and pulled an old radio out of a drawer. He put it on the windowsill and turned it on. And I hissed, wheezed, and suddenly, an old song his mother used to sing when she mopped the floor. Only you can make this world seem right. Oh, shit, he whispered and looked up. I get it. Not money, not children, not those photo albums. But this is a song, a dream, a memory. This is love. Not material, it's not explainable. But the only one that never leaves. He went to the kitchen. He took an old postcard, the one his mother had written before she died. Be kind to people, because then they will be kind to you. And if not, it's okay. The main thing is that you did your part. I'm sorry, Mom, that I wasn't always like that. A tear fell directly on the ink. The night turned into dawn. In the morning, he took Elvis and went to the park. He had an old thermos and sandwiches in his backpack. Let's have breakfast together, Mom, he said into the air. He sat down on the bench. I looked around. The world was the same. But he was different. A young man in his 20s sat down next to him. Excuse me, mister, do you have a phone charger? George smiled. No, I don't, but I have a story. Would you like to hear it? Summer is not about the weather. It's about what lives in the eyes. Even if you are over 60, even if the whole world is against you, even if your heart is like a broken thermos. Sometimes something happens that changes everything. Or someone does. After that dream with his mom, George woke up different, as if someone had turned his back, the one he had been afraid to straighten for years. It's Sunday. It was quiet. Elvis was hanging around the door, asking to go outside. Let's run away from home, Elvis, George said, pulling on his baseball cap. For a day, maybe two. Just you and me. He grabbed a bottle of water, an old Kodak camera, and a backpack full of dry food and started walking toward the lake 3 blocks away. There, on a bench under an old maple tree, she was already sitting. Sarah. In the same Sarah he had met in the supermarket a few weeks ago. She was holding a glass of iced coffee and a book, 100 Years of Solitude. George, she said, not looking up. I knew you'd come. I didn't know, he replied. That's why I came. They sat in silence for about 10 minutes. I used to be afraid of getting old, Sarah said, and now I'm afraid I won't have time to do everything. I thought it was too late. Yura smiled. Do you want some ice cream? Only if it's pistachio. I knew it. They walked along the beach, chewing on ice cream like children, and Elvis ran ahead of them carrying a branch in his teeth. My husband, Sarah said suddenly, died 3 years ago. He had a heart attack, right while watering the roses. And my wife didn't die. She just disappeared. When she went to another younger man. Which is worse, do you think? Or does it matter? No. The main thing is that you're here now. They sat down on the pyre. George pulled out his camera and took a few shots. Can I take a picture of you? I'm old and wrinkled. You're like a page from a favorite book. Not a new one, but the best one. She laughed, and at that moment he saw that she was beautiful, in her own way. George, she said, you know how to be with a person. Not everyone can do that. Even those who are young and rich. And I just want to live a little longer. Not to exist, but to live. Me too. On the way back, someone was playing guitar outside a coffee shop. An old hippie with a beard down to his chest. Do you remember how we used to dance when we were young? She asked. I haven't. Well, then it's time to start. And she pulled him. Right onto the asphalt. In the middle of the people. And he danced. Clumsily, ridiculously, but sincerely. And he was laughing. And she laughed. And he felt that he would never forget this summer. In the evening they sat on the porch of her house. Elvis was dozing with his head on Sarah's legs. I don't know how to be with anyone, George whispered. I've forgotten how it feels. What if we break against each other? What if we heal? Before he left, George asking tomorrow back to the lake. Sarah looked at him for a long, long time. Tomorrow is a tradition. And the door closed, leaving George standing under the starry sky, with a new fear. The fear of being happy again. You can rent an apartment, a bicycle, even a coffin for a farewell. But you can't rent happiness. It comes unexpectedly. It doesn't ask if it's for a long time or forever. It just sits down next to you and says, well, old man, shall we sit for a while? George's chest had been itching since the morning. Not that it hurt, no. It was just something that was bothering him. He checked the kettle again, dusted the windowsill, and talked Elvis out of chewing on his slippers, but it was no use. because today he had to tell her that for the first time in years, he didn't want to be alone. "Oh, no, come on, George," he muttered to himself. "You're not 16. But you're not 90 either, and that's the key." Sarah was waiting for him by the bench under the old maple tree. It's going to rain," she said instead of greeting him. "Maybe it will wash away all the stupid thoughts." They sat down, shoulder to shoulder. Elvis lay between them like a living boundary. I'm thinking," George said, "that we could start over." "What? With you?" She didn't answer. She just held his hand, and that was enough. They were silent. For a long time, only the trees made noise and the rain drizzled. "I'm afraid to be happy," Sarah finally said, "because happiness is taken away, like a rented dress after a wedding. And I'm afraid I won't have time to feel it. Look how well we fit together," she smiled. "Two scared pensioners who still dream. Why not? We're not trees. We can change our place, our habits, our lives, but not our past. You don't have to. The past is the soil. And we are new shoots. Even if we are a little gray." In the evening they returned to her place. Sarah took an old box out of the closet. "This is my once upon a time." The box contained letters, photos, movie tickets, and a napkin from a restaurant with the words, "I like you." "This is all my husband left behind." "Did you keep it?" "Yes. But now I want to make room. For whom? Now." And she put another thing in the box, a photo of her and George on a bench by the lake. "So I know where the new beginning began." Yes, George." "Yes." He stayed the night. Not for the first time, but for the first time, without fear that something would go wrong tomorrow. For the first time in years, he fell asleep next to a living person, not a memory. And he didn't dream about his mother's voice, his betrayed wife, or his empty kitchen. He just dreamed of dawn, and the smell of coffee, and a dog jumping on the bed. And he knew it wasn't a dream. It was the real thing. In the morning, they sat on the balcony and drank coffee. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, "maybe we should go to the sea. You said you don't like sunbathing, but I love you. And with you, I don't even mind getting a tan." "No," he smiled. "I agree. I'll rent your life. No deposit, but with you." The phone rang. "It's the clinic. Your labs. It would be better if you came in person." He froze. He looked at Elvis, at Sarah, at the sky. "Okay," he said, "Ilma, but only after the sea."